Alright, welcome to this how I created the HUD for this tutorial. So as you can see, before I even started, I made sure I have exactly where the UI is going to live in and the HUD. I always like to separate each individual parts of the HUD using that separator line, and then I put whatever elements on top of it. So that helps me not only in animation, but also for the UI to distinguish between each section, header, footer, and content. So as you can see here, so we have the title, and then we have those subtitles, which is the steps. And now I'm doing the content. And I start by creating exactly what I need this HUD to be. I was kind of, the start of the inspiration started from Tron, the OS scene. But then I felt like that was too Tron-y because that was Tron and I did not want to do something like Tron. So instead, I closed all the kind of inspiration that I had and I just focused on how I would actually see a terminal look like, you know. Nothing too super fancy and nothing too generic. So I just wanted to go with my own style. So in the beginning, I tried to do this filters design as a folder, you know, with that little dash there. But I thought that was a little bit too, again, it's too generic. Like every single futuristic HUD, they have that little hexagon kind of diagonal cut. And I was like, that's not what I want. I just want something to be me, something to be clean. I separated the center of the screen into two modules. So the first module, which is loading the data, the lines, and each line is just a representation of a bunch of codes, because that's what it is. So I made two modules, and as you can see, I separated them with that line. So that line drives the eye of the viewer to where the module is. And that's exactly what UX is all about. So then I wanted to do something selective, and I just wanted to try this in this project, and that's what personal projects are for. Just for you to try something that people have not tried before, or you personally have not tried before. So I wanted to do a little bit of Moroccan tile design there, and either it makes sense or not, I wanted to try it. I just wanted to try it so that for my next project, I know exactly what to avoid and not to avoid to make this work. So for the main selection, I went with an Arabic typography, and I was like, oh, actually Arabic looks good. Let me create the first Arabic futuristic HUD. And then I started replacing, you know, text with the Arabic fonts. And I thought it's gonna look good, but it didn't. It didn't live. It was too small. It didn't really live with my design. If I wanted it to live, I'll actually have to make this design way bigger. And it doesn't make sense because I'll have to give up the module. And the coding module was something that I really wanted to have in the design. So as you can see, personal projects is all about trials. And yeah, I tried it and it didn't work. So now I know why it didn't work. So next time I won't be putting more time into doing this. And if I want to do it, I know exactly where I should be doing it, which is a screen that is really big. That's the only way I would do a futuristic design with Arabic language. And I really want to make that work. And probably, maybe you should, if you don't know what to do. And then here, I just want to put a kind of notification system notification saying what's happening with the data and the current state of the data. Then I start on by creating the first line, and then by creating the first line, it just gives me a space to create any number of lines that I want. As you're gonna see, I'm gonna take, I have now the template there, and I make the selection. So all I have to do now is literally just duplicate that and pre-comp it. And now I have never-ending pre-comp. It's always good to work with the pre-comps instead of having to have all the layers laid out on your timeline, it could be a little bit intimidating, even if you're experienced. And then I wanted to add a little bit of a normality in the database. And instead of having everything looks fine, I wanted to show that what if there was something that was not fine? What if this, for example, that's trending or something? What if the hero comes in and he finds out that there was a data that was missing? And while I was creating this, I was already thinking about what kind of, what kind of device is going to be running this, while I was working for this. Because this is how I like to create my HUD. I like to create the HUD and then I'll design a device around it, instead of designing the device and then putting a HUD around it. So I went with Vitaly Burgerov kind of design, because it's so clean, and I wanted to create something like that. Also as a practice for Moi 3D, which... as I mentioned, one of my recent Instagram stories, that if Dennis gets 350 followers, I'll release a Moi 3D tutorial for beginners and how I created that device. Alright, so now I'm putting module examples, like the code module examples. I don't worry too much about the content of what I'm gonna write. I just write whatever kind of coding developer lingo syntax I have in my head, and I just duplicate that, and it's only at the very end of the project that I'll replace all this text with the real text. As you can see here, I pre-comp it so that I could change it easily later on. I make sure that everything is aligned properly. And once everything is done, I start by creating the filters. Because when you have a lot of data, sometimes it could be really annoying if you have to scroll over them. So it could be very helpful to have a filter that will help you, filter the data of how you want to see it. And then, of course, is a quit menu. You always have to give the user the ability to leave. As you can see, I tried to do some very new way of designing the closing button, but it didn't really speak well to me, so I just went with the generic X instead. When it comes to the separator, I like to add this little bit of aesthetic of doing two squares on the end of the lines to show that this is the start and this is the end. And then I do them at the center, so that I can split the two modules of the list and the code. Once that's done, I thought that maybe I should make a difference between which step is the user in the system. And that's why you can see that I darkened the step 2, because he's still in step 1. And then I started designing how would that error line, the data that was not found, or there was a lost packet there, how it would look like. So I started designing it and started different styles. And I ended up with this one. It's pretty straightforward. I mean, if it makes sense, why should I try to go even crazier? And to finish it all, I just tried to design a button, futuristic button holder for the filters. And once I design one, I could just duplicate it and use it on all the others. This is the beauty of using pre-comps, is that you can just duplicate them later on and do iterations and replace them, as you can see in the tutorial for this animation. All right, that's all. I hope you learned.